Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to, well, see some of your faces and see some of your black squares and imagine the exciting things, sorry, black rectangles, that are going on behind them. If you can have a face, it's lovely, but we understand if you can't right at this moment. I'll just one or two more people making their way in. Zoom should have told you, but we're recording this. So anyone who is at a carol concert or anything else they might be at right at this moment, actually listen to the record. Catherine, I've made you co-host, so you might in a minute need to start pressing to let people in. So thank you very much for coming along to our In Conversation, and we apologise already for the title. I hope you've noticed our cheesy pun on the road with the CaAR brackets curriculum assessment review, uniting around a national RE journey. As you might know, it's a follow-up to the In Conversation we had right at the beginning of the year, which we held before the interim or final curriculum and assessment reports had. My name's Fiona Moss, and I work as the Education and Programmes Manager at Culham St Gabriel's, and I'm going to kind of guide you through today's session, but really the people who are going to give us their great wisdom I will identify in a moment. So the publication of the Curriculum and Assessment Review marks a really significant landmark, you might say, moment for RE in England. The review, as I'm sure you know, recommends that RE should be included within a new national curriculum. And this is a proposal that carries profound implications for schools, for teachers, for SACREs and the wider RE community. So a moment like this calls for clarity, it calls for collective reflection, and we think constructive leadership. And we hope we can add to that and explore a little of that in this session. In a minute, I will introduce everybody, but I'm just going to talk to you about a few things that you might find useful. And then once our panelists are speaking, I will drop the links to the things I'm going to mention into the chat. So you will get those in a moment. So you may already have read the response that Culham St Gabriel's made to the Curriculum and Assessment Review. I'll drop that into the chat for you. And Catherine also wrote an excellent blog on that topic, so I'll pop that in as well. You may find useful a conversation that Catherine and I recorded. It's about 15 to 20 minutes long. It's all about CaAR, and it might be useful. A couple of people have used it in local groups and said it's been really useful to help their teachers understand what's going on, or perhaps to send to colleagues or senior leaders, or maybe even SACRE members as well. You might also be interested in the document that we've been using for quite some time, which was our 6 reasons why RE should be in the national curriculum. You might think, well, we're sorted now. But of course, as we will unpack in a minute, it's not entirely sorted. And for some people, it might be important they realise why the Curriculum and Assessment Review has recommended that. So that document might be useful for you as well. NATRE have also produced a really useful PowerPoint that you might use in staff meetings and in other meetings as well. So I will pop that into the chat. Seeing the chat, mentioning the chat there, we'll use that through the session. I wonder how you felt. I wonder how you felt when you read the Curriculum and Assessment Review. It came out just before you all started teaching, so you probably didn't get a chance to read it before you started teaching on, was it November the 5th or November the 6th? November the 5th, there you go. But I wonder, now you've read it, now you've had a little chance to read it, what you thought when you read it. Were you full of joy? Were you concerned? Were you sad? Were you expectant? Um, Pop how you felt in the chat. Be really interesting to get a sense of the room and how you felt when you read that particular proclamation, recommendation that was in the chat. Thanks, Lindsay. Hopeful but aware of the work left to do. Yes. In comparison to the other recommendations that were made by the review, it's one that's got an awful lot of work, and unlike any of the others, work that has been given back to a particular community. And yes, I can see your conversations going on in the chat. There's you seem to be fairly surprised. We've got relief. Yes, couldn't quite believe it, Katie. I know why you say that. Do pop those into the chat while I continue talking. So you will also know that we're currently waiting to hear how what was written in the recommendation is going to play out. So the recommendation said that there will be a two-stage process that was outlined in the report, and we want to know how that's going to progress. We're waiting to hear that. Now, that first stage of those two stages is going to be led by Dr. Vanessa Ogden. You'll remember she was one of the commissioners of the Curriculum and Assessment Review. What we do know is there'll be a sort of overseeing group. I think it called them a task and finish group in the report. I've called them an overseeing group. That is just my language. But we also know that there will be a teacher group that's going to be convened by NATRE, and a religion and belief group that will be convened by the Religious Education Council. And I have now told you everything I know about that, so I don't have a lot more to say. But there we are. So that's sort of fairly new knowledge. I think if you were at the webinar that the Religious Education Council ran about 10 days ago, that was mentioned by Vanessa there. So here we are at our In Conversation. As we thought about revisiting the topic, we thought it was only right to bring back the panel from earlier this year. And that panel, very importantly for us, includes teachers who are teaching in the classroom. I haven't asked Katie and Ben whether they were teaching until 3:15 today, but I'm going to guess that they probably were. So let me introduce our panel, and I might manage to pin them in a minute when I've finished talking. You never know, Catherine might manage to pin them as well. We'll see. She raised her eyebrows then, maybe she won't. So first of all, let me introduce Katie Freeman. Katie, if you don't know her, is chair of the National Association of Teachers of RE. She is a primary teacher and RE subject leader in Plymouth. She's vice chair of a SACRE. She's been on the C of E Working Party for RE. The list could go on, and that's true of all of them, but I'll stop there. So she's our first panelist. Our second panelist, Ben Wood, a secondary RE teacher and head of department in a comprehensive school in Lancashire. He's the previous NATRE chair. He has also been involved in curriculum development. It's a real speciality of his, and he was part of one of the religious REC's groups developing a religion and world views curriculum. Panelist number 3 is Paul Smalley. Paul was the chair of NASACRE, that's the National Association of Standing Advisory Councils for Religious Education, and is now its executive officer. He's on the Religious Education Council's board. He's a multi-academy trust trustee, as well as PGCE lecturer at Liverpool Hope University. All 4 of them quite busy people, if you haven't already worked that out. Finally, we have Catherine Wright. Catherine is the CEO of Culham St Gabriel's. Previously, she was an RE advisor, and she is also on the REC board. So we're going to hear first from them. But those of you who are listening, please feel free to comment in the chat. if you've got a question, we hope to have time for questions for them at the end. Please pop the word question at the beginning of your question to give me a chance of actually picking those out. So we're going to come to each of our panelists in turn. And if I pick out some, I might pick out some connections and comments on them in between questions. We've got 4 questions we are going to ask of them. So the first question, Katie, you are going to answer this one first, followed by Ben, Paul, and then Catherine. So our first question today, what are your hopes for the next steps around the recommendation for RE to be put in a new national curriculum for England? Katie, over to you.
So I think remember the 5th of November will have a new meaning for us in the RE community from now on. And I think that day, to answer your question, Fiona, was full of hope, actually. It was a hope for our subject, a recommendation that we hoped we'd get, but weren't sure whether it would happen. And I really think that a door is open for us. So I've kind of outlined some of the hopes that I have. But I think the big one is about getting a consensus across the sector. So part of this recommendation talks about that it is a recommendation for RE to move into the national curriculum, but we need to find a consensus. And I think that the real element of hope in this is that we've done it once before with the National Content Standard. So there's a lot of hope in the community that we can do it again by working well together. I think in terms of pedagogy, I'd like to see the religion and worldviews pedagogy remaining in RE, because I think it really helps children and supports them to understand the lived experience of the people in which they're finding out about in the RE classroom. And I think that as we've kind of been getting used to using that pedagogy, this idea of substantive knowledge, those multidisciplinary lenses, different ways of knowing, and the personal knowledge are really important. But we need to make sure that we have those really clearly defined for the entirety of the community so that teachers feel confident about using them and planning with them. I think I would like to see a real kind of clear focus put on CPD. So if we get this recommendation agreed, I think teacher training is really important. We know that we've got 51% of teachers teaching in classrooms who RE is not their kind of first subject, it's their second subject. And while we know those teachers are doing an absolutely brilliant job to deliver a high quality RE curriculum for all, we need really good teacher training. So bringing in a new national curriculum subject, if you like, that for me is really important. So I would hope there would be some funding surrounding that. I think bursaries for RE are also really important. And those subject knowledge enhancement courses, I would like to see those coming back in and a focus being put on them. I've talked a lot, I think, about this idea of a postcode lottery when it comes to RE provision. And I think for me, we talked a bit on Louisa Smith's, I saw her name pop up on her podcast about actually this is the opportunity to end that now. And so that all children in all schools are going to get a really clear provision that's equal in breadth and depth. I talked a bit about my friend had a baby on the Sunday after the recommendation was made, and she's an RE leader. And we were messaging each other, and we were saying, you know, isn't this so exciting that when he goes to school, if this all goes through as we hope, that he will get the same provision as every other child, and there won't be this postcode lottery anymore. So for me, I think that's one of the really, really big things. And leading on from that, as a primary teacher, I think I want to know that my children in my school that I'm teaching are going to go into a secondary school with other children having been taught the same stuff, and putting those secondary teachers in a place where they've got a year 7 cohort that haven't had this postcode lottery, that are going in and they're getting a really clear offer. And then my last thing that I want to talk about is local offer. So I think global RE is really important. Find out nationally about how different people live, whether they be religious or non-religious, is really important. But I also really love the local offer. I have a really, really active and positive SACRE that I've been part of for years. And there are some really good voices in that SACRE of people who can go in and share really clear lived experience. So I would hope that we would continue to see a focus on kind of local communities as well as the national and global. and that we would look at local places of worship. I come from Plymouth. We've got the oldest English speaking synagogue in the whole of the UK, and I think that's a really lovely thing for children to find out about in the Jewish community that live in the area in which they are going to school. So as much as I want them to find out about national and global, I think I'd like to see SACREs perhaps having a new role without the burden of having to write a locally agreed syllabus. I know lots of people love it, but it is a really big job. So I'd like to see SACREs still being used, but perhaps in a new reimagined way. And I'm sure Paul will talk about that in a minute as well.
Thanks, Katie. I think some of the others may concur with a lot of what you have said about clarity, about equity, about and I love your example of what that baby that has just been born is going to get, but that important bit about teachers and teacher training as well. So we're going to hand over to Ben. What would you like to add?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Just to confirm, I am a secondary teacher. I've been teaching falsification principle today, and Islamic prayer and Buddhist responses to suffering. There's a pretty usual kind of day for an RE teacher, I guess. So what am I hopeful about? To echo some of what Katie said, I'm hopeful that this final step can be achieved, that we can achieve some consensus, and that recommendation can be followed through, that we join the national curriculum. A slight qualification to that is I mean, I was hopeful that the England cricket team could be competitive in Australia this time, and never. So with hope comes that always never underestimate the ability of people to mess things up at the final stage. Sometimes we've still got something to do here. Okay, this is not inevitable. This is not in the bag. There's work to be done from everybody. And that will involve some humility from us all as well, I think, as this is a tricky process we've got to engage upon now. But I am hopeful on the basis that this recommendation would not have been, the Secretary of State would not have made this recommendation if the Secretary of State did not think that consensus could be achieved. They wouldn't have made that recommendation. So I'm hopeful that that can be achieved. Assuming that then happens, what am I hopeful? It moves us away, and you can take your choice of adjective. It moves us away from being a weird subject or an exceptional subject, depends on which kind of angle you like to take on that. We become a normal subject. I've long wanted RE to be a normal subject, just part of the curriculum, plays its role alongside other subjects in that broad and balanced education that we want our children to have. Longer term, hoping better teaching across the board. It picks up Katie's point about postcode lottery. Better teaching. If we have a national curriculum, we have a clearer sense of what it is we're going to be teaching. The resourcing can be better. The understanding of what knowledge we're trying to impart and the skills we're trying to inculcate in our students is better. I think that can improve teaching. So those would be, and the final one would be progression. I'm the secondary teacher. And I have 25, 26 feeder primary schools. The honest appraisal, I was talking with some people this week about this, the honest situation is the variety of knowledge or lack of knowledge that my pupils arrive with means I basically have to start from a blank slate at the beginning of year 7, because it's impossible to sort of build on something that's there for some and there in another way for others and not there at all for others. So if we have a curriculum, we get the better teaching, we get rid of a postcode lottery, then I can build a Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4, Key Stage 5 curriculum that builds on Key Stage 1 and 2.
Thank you, Ben. I hated your cricket analogy, but that's only because I know how badly they've done, just in case anyone didn't know how badly they've done. But I think your points on consensus and humility, so important on humility, but your point around progression, really important too. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I've not been teaching the falsification principle or anything like that today, so that's lovely. Um, but I did go this morning to see a former trainee of mine who is now sadly no longer an RE teacher, but is doing some brilliant work with 16 to 25-year-olds not in employment or training. Variety, it's a lovely thing, isn't it? Sometimes. I think I want to agree with everything that Katie and Ben has said. Absolutely, they are my hopes too. And I'm confident. I'm confident that we can reach a consensus in this first stage. And I'm largely confident because the people who are saying we need to reach consensus appear to be confident that that's possible. Vanessa Ogden seems confident that she can weave this web of magic, and so I'm filled with confidence for that. So looking a little bit further down the road, the journey of RE, I'm hopeful that, as Katie said, that this will lead to a reimagined local RE. I've written something, I don't know if a few of you have read it, around how the idea that Kent is a locality, or Ben in one bit of Lancashire is the same locality as the rest of Lancashire is clearly a nonsense. These are huge places. If you look at national curriculum history, it has a much more nuanced and a much better, I think, understanding of what local means. Local can mean a study at the size of your town. If you're in Plymouth, that's great, but Plymouth's very different to, trying to think of somewhere else in Devon now, Totnes or Bodmin. And Katie's nodding, I got that right. So yeah, you can do it at the level of your town or your community. You can do it at the study at the level of your school or even your family. You know, what a wonderful local study it would be to think about how has the religious views of your family changed over the last 100 years. That'd be a lovely study, I think, in RE. And so I'm hopeful of a reimagining of what local means in RE, and I'm hopeful of a reimagining of what SACREs mean. And I know a number of people have said, oh, I'm worried about SACREs. What are SACREs going to do? And I have been banging on for a number of years that SACREs do not write syllabuses. That's an agreed syllabus conference. It's a different body. Changing them doesn't necessarily affect what a SACRE does. A SACRE reports and responds and supports and helps the provision of RE in that local authority area. And again, I'm hopeful of that because I've heard Dr. Vanessa Ogden talk about her hopes and how she values SACREs and how she sees them as a vehicle for improvement, for support, for training, but also perhaps more widely than simply school RE. There's a lovely Theos report out about religious education outside of school. SACRE should be playing a part of that. There was a couple of us at the Commission on Community and Cohesion on Monday giving evidence. SACRE can be a really powerful tool in that whole community cohesion drive, and I'm confident that this can happen because of Vanessa Ogden's confidence, but also because it's something that Charles Clark, who NASACRE have worked with closely for a number of years, sees as a strength of SACREs, this community cohesion idea. I'll stop because I think I've used up my 3 minutes.
You have. Thank you. We've all used more than our 3 minutes. It's absolutely fine. You'll just have to answer some of the others quickly. I've put that idea of reimagined local that Paul's brought out. I've put his article into the chat for you to have a look at, and I may find the one you just referenced in a minute. And I'm going to hand over to Catherine. What are your hopes, Catherine?
Okay, well, firstly, I think this was reflected in the comments that people put right at the start about how they felt when they heard the news. I think, first of all, we should celebrate where we've got to. I mean, it's a landmark recommendation. And I think it acknowledges, and I think Katie touched on this, the huge inequity in the curriculum offer for children at the moment, this postcode lottery. And so it provides a way forward to bring justice and equity into the system. And I think for one moment, we should perhaps just stop and realise the enormity of this. We have a government that think the subject is worthy enough to go into a national curriculum. Not only that, I think we have a government who think religion and belief literacy matters as well. And if RE does go into a national curriculum, there is an opportunity to utilise this moment to establish, I think, better religion and belief literacy more widely in the education sector as well. Not just in terms of RE, but in terms of better religion and belief literacy for everyone in the school community. Because as Ben has said, it kind of normalises the importance of religion and belief literacy, in our case RE, but more widely, it's really, really important. So I see one of my hopes is it's a bit of a catalyst. You know, this is huge. What a massive opportunity we have. So let's not waste it. It may never come again. But I think we need to grasp the enormity of this. So my hopes are kind of twofold, really. The first one is that we trust the process now. You know, Dr. Vanessa Ogden is highly regarded, respected, and trusted, I think, by the RE community. So we need to allow her to do her job and to lead the process. So my hope is that we will trust the process. And secondly, my hope is, and I think particularly Ben and Katie, you've touched on this already, my hope is that we will put children and young people at the heart. You know, this is not about organisations or individual agendas. It's about children and young people, their world, this baby that you referred to, Katie, their world, their future, their lives. So my hope is that if we trust the process and put children at the heart, we will be able to work together. And I think there's going to be humility bingo in this session, because I thought about, you know, working together humbly, okay, to bring about a landmark settlement for every single child. That's my hope.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm sure you could hear the connections between our four speakers. I did love what you said about actually, let's celebrate, let's realise that this is an amazing thing that has happened. But of course, children and young people at the heart is most important. Okay, that was the upbeat bit. Now, my next question is, and you can't have 3 minutes because you can't possibly have that many concerns. A little bit less time for you each. Do you have any concerns? Ben, we're going to start with you.
I alluded to one before, that, you know, I've woken up early over many mornings recently to find that England are terrible at cricket. And I've inevitably, any curriculum that comes out of this process, I'm going to have some issues with. That's inevitable. I'm not going to perfectly agree, because it's not the curriculum I have in my school, really. So there's going to be bits that I'm going to be a bit. That's where I think the humility comes in. We're just going to have to accept that, okay, there's going to be some compromise involved. We've got a very diverse community here. My concern is, though, that there are some people who have potentially very loud voices who could kick up a fuss at the last minute. That's my concern. I think it's a small percent of chance that happens. Others have noted that, you know, Paul was mentioning Vanessa's confidence. I think that it should give us confidence. But that's ultimately my concern, that we snatch defeat from the jaws of victory at the last moment. And as Catherine, I think you're absolutely right. This is once in a lifetime. This chance doesn't come again.
Thanks, Ben. Yes, that's something I've very much been reflecting on. And I really like a reminder that let's not expect everything to be absolutely perfect, or absolutely what each of us want. There's compromise is really important, and that was laid bare in the report. There was a clear line about that in the report. Paul, any concerns?
I don't like the word concerns, but I have 4 challenges. I think there are 4 things that are quite challenging that Vanessa and the working groups and the expert groups and everyone else needs to get to grips with. The first one is the challenge of the dual system. But I am confident, so for those of you that are not aware, there's a historic agreement between particularly the churches and the state about how you provide funding and education for our young people. And part of the historic settlement was that schools with a religious character are allowed to teach a religious education that promotes their views, that is in line with their thinking. And again, I'm confident that this challenge can be met because Vanessa seems to think it's possible. She wouldn't have proposed this if she doesn't. So I'm confident that some form of wording, some form of national curriculum will flow from this. But I think it is a challenge. The second one, and Katie sort of alluded to this earlier, is around training and implementation. If in 2028 RE is a national curriculum subject, it won't change the fact that there are lots of people who teach lots of other things most of their time. It won't change the fact that primary teachers have probably had 3 hours of training on RE if they are lucky. And there will be lots of schools, like Ben mentioned, around the country that are having to change their curriculum to something else that they're less familiar with. And I think that is going to be a big challenge for the RE community in the future. The third challenge is how we, and I know that this was one of the Church of England's concerns, how we protect an RE curriculum against potential undue future political influence. So I'm quite happy with the government that we have at the moment. I think they're a nice bunch of people and are going to put together an RE curriculum that me and Ben and Katie and Catherine and everyone else here will probably get along with. But you never know who the next government are going to be and what reckless thing they might choose to do to our curriculum. And the fourth challenge, I think, is the interim. So we're in a weird situation now, and already I know NASACRE have had some questions from SACREs going, oh, we don't need to do anything now, do we? Because it's going to be in the national curriculum, so we'll not bother rewriting our syllabus, we'll not bother putting on any training, we'll not bother doing. And I think there's a real danger that in the interim, things might fall apart.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for changing that language. I'll refer to it as challenges now. So the dual system training, political influence, which of course we have on a local level as well now, as well as that national level, and the interim. Catherine, any concerns?
Yeah, concerns or challenges. Yeah. Yes. Well, going back to what I said before, that people don't trust the process and try to, I don't know, do it themselves or something. And also that people don't put children at the heart. So they put their own interests or agendas and don't come with humility. So there's those two. But actually, what I was going to say basically reflects more or less exactly what Ben said, which is my biggest concern is if we don't achieve a consensus. Because what message does that give to government? But more importantly, what message does it give to our children, to our young people, to our society, to our profession, if we can't come up with a consensus? It would kind of say, I don't know, we're too interested in our own agendas. We can't agree enough to better the lives of children and young people in our society. And I think I do understand that there are sensitivities and challenges. Paul's alluded to some of those. But our world is not the one from 1944 settlement. And I really believe strongly we need to put children and young people at the heart. And I think if there is no consensus, then RE might, I don't want to get too depressed now, but may disappear in our schools. The education world would sigh and say, well, the RE community, they can't even agree on, what the curriculum looks like. Let's just let it whittle away quietly. And I think there'd be even less funding than there is now, which isn't a lot at all, in fact. So kind of to turn it round, I'm prepared to do everything I possibly can to ensure that doesn't happen. And believe it or not, I'm sure other people have done this and looked up the word consensus. What does it actually mean? And I've looked at various definitions, but it's about a middle ground. It's the middle ground between agreeing and disagreeing. Where is there enough in that middle ground that people can come together on? And it means kind of to assent to a decision, even if you don't agree with all of it. And I think that's really important and I think really helpful because a bit like Paul's alluded to, I think that is perfectly possible. I think it's perfectly possible if we come with open minds and with that humility. And I'll hopefully from our perspective, gave us, we'll do everything we can to support that process.
Thank you, Catherine. I think that's really helpful to get us to think about that word consensus. Are there any concerns or challenges left that anyone hasn't mentioned, Katie?
So I think you're probably going to hear very similar things from me. But Catherine's just given me a great lead in, because that's exactly what I was going to talk about. I think I'm concerned about, or the challenge maybe, to coin a phrase, Paul, might be when people are kind of putting across their views of what they want to see the subject looking like. We could get tangled up in a web that wouldn't put teachers and children at the heart of it. And ultimately, this is not about us or what we want. This is about what's right for the subject and right for children and education. We are living in a time at the moment where social cohesion, helping children to understand each other and the world around them and the people who live there, is so important. And we know our subject can help with that. And so we have to model that really well to children, and we have to show them that we can be humble with each other, we can listen well to each other, and we can act justly. And sometimes we might have to give a little bit of ground that we don't feel 100% comfortable with, but we need to listen to what other people are saying, because we can't go into the classroom teaching one thing and not model that well ourselves. I also really want to see teachers and pupils at the heart of this process as well. So, teachers are good at knowing their own pedagogy and how children learn. So I really want to see those teacher voices in that space talking about, how do we construct a curriculum that helps children to know more, to remember more, teaches them about other people, and the skills that they need to go out into the world and be ready for work and to live well together. So yes, I'd just really like to see a teacher voice. So it's a bit of an ask, not really a challenge, just something that I'd be concerned if I didn't see that in the process.
Thank you, Katie. And thank you, those of you who are popping comments or questions into the chat. The next two responses they give are going to be much shorter. So I think I only have one question yet so far. So Saj, you're likely to get yours asked. So do remember to put some questions in. But Trevor has put a really important comment into the chat regarding what Catherine was saying around consensus. He notes that the Curriculum and Assessment Review report mentions the consensus that there already is around the non-statutory national content standard. And so that's going to be very important as a place to build from. So thank you, Trevor, for mentioning that. And yes, the other one, Amanda, the right to withdraw has not been mentioned at all. And if it had been mentioned, we'd know if they were going to mention that. So nothing on that at all. Okay, a final two questions, a little bit more quick fire. So we've picked out one recommendation. What do you think about the recommendation to remove the statutory duty to teach RE to all in school sixth forms and the rationale behind it? I'm going to start with Paul this time.
I think I can be really brief here. It's blindingly obvious that it's the right thing to do. I've been in a lot of schools with sixth forms. I've been in a lot of sixth form colleges, and the only places that do statutory RE for those between 16 and 18 are sixth forms or schools with a sixth form that have a religious nature. In 30 years of education, I haven't seen CaAR RE. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I've never seen it, CaAR RE, in a non-faith setting. So it's yeah.
And the law in itself was very complicated. So I had one daughter who went to an FE college where they didn't have to deliver her that. Another one who went to a school sixth form where they didn't deliver it, but they should have been doing. So the law was complicated. Catherine, what do you want to add to that?
I'm just going to say, I'm really hopeful that the government applies the same sort of logic to the widespread disregard of the 70-mile-an-hour speed limit on a motorway.
I'm not going to make any comments on that. Catherine, quick, get us out of the
Well,
speeding hole.
I'm not sure I agree with the last bit from Paul, but what he said previously, I absolutely agree with. And I think if you look at the context and the rationale of the entire curriculum assessment review, it's all about commitment to social justice, about inclusion and equity, and so therefore it makes total sense to repeal the post 16. Paul's already touched on the fact that RE is not compulsory in FE colleges or other forms of post 16 education, and also the reasoning around pupil or learner choice and subject specialism, particularly post 16. So for me, it also makes sense. But I also wanted just very quickly to touch on the Theos report that I think it was Paul mentioned earlier. The Theo, and I'm going to put a link in the chat. The Theos think tank research report explores religion and worldview education outside of schools. So surely we also should be thinking about, what enrichment activities can take place beyond the school gate through youth groups, museums, galleries, media, scouts, guides, whoever it happens to be, and perhaps be thinking more about how we can support learning outside of the classroom, particularly post 16. So kind of ending on a positive there.
Thank you, Catherine. Katie, anything to add?
I don't really have a huge concern surrounding this. I think just what Catherine said about, pupil choice and subject specialism, all those kind of things. And I think maybe this is the point that we do make a change. And I think if we move as a subject into the national curriculum, I would hope that would mean that the provision for all children in all schools would be better right from age 4. And if that is better from 4 going all the way up to 16, and there's really good teaching of RE, then actually we're preparing children for life and work better because the offer's been more thorough and it's not patchy provision. And so those 16-year-olds will be better placed to go out into the world of work and further education and all those other things, having had good quality RE as part of a national curriculum.
Thank you, Katie. Ben, final thoughts on this one from you?
Yeah, it's tidying up, as Paul said. Essentially, tidying up reflects a situation. It doesn't happen in most schools, and obviously, the removal of the statutory duty doesn't mean that a Catholic sixth form college would could continue to offer a sort of core RE program if that's part of what they want to do. So it's an entirely sensible move.
Thanks, Ben. So the final question I'm going to ask is more broadly about the curriculum and assessment review. What do you think about any other aspects of the curriculum and assessment review and the government response to it? Catherine, you're going to start us off with this one.
Yeah, there's quite a lot, but I'll try and be as brief as I can. So the first thing I think is the introduction of an oracy framework. And just a reminder, we had an Oracy Focus Week, which you can go back and look at on RE Online if you wish to learn a bit more about that. But I think in addition, the review focuses and emphasises the curriculum should be inclusive and representative, ensuring all young people can see themselves in the curriculum, in what they learn. I think that's really important for our subject, but more widely as well. So inclusive materials and examples, reflecting plurality of modern society. So I think that element is really crucial and connects really well to RE. But also, and this comes back to Paul's point about the local, the review says the national curriculum should remain an aspirational entitlement for all, but schools need flexibility to go beyond it with locally tailored content and enrichment activities. I think that's, again, it really emphasises the fact that local matters, and that's really important for our subject. And then I was also pleased to see the recommendation the EVAT performance measure be removed, because I think that's had a very negative impact on RE. But also just going back to the curriculum a little bit, this kind of strong emphasis on a knowledge-rich approach and a coherent structural architecture to the curriculum in a general sense. And that was reflected particularly in the conceptual paper that was released alongside the interim report. And I think that aligns really, really well with the religion and worldviews approach, with its emphasis on deep understanding of concepts and the language around substantive, disciplinary and personal, which I think Katie referred to at the start of this conversation this afternoon. So there's lots more I could say, but those are the key things I think for me. Oracy, people seeing themselves in the curriculum, importance of the local, and then thinking about how the curriculum is structured.
Thanks, Catherine. We'll go over to you, Katie.
So as a serving primary school teacher, like Ben, I was in school until 3:20 this afternoon teaching RE in year 1. And I really love this approach to looking at the whole curriculum. Before I was an RE teacher, my subject was the arts. I took arts subject at A-level, and I think that arts are a really good tool for pupils into studying RE. Actually, I think there's a lot to be done through art and design, through looking at religious artwork, asking big questions and all of those things. And I think art subjects have been long forgotten, and sometimes we've lost the language of skills, and actually you need to have a knowledge of the skills in order to access some of the kind of content of any curriculum, but including RE. And I'm pleased to see that this has been considered. We want children to be successful across the curriculum, and we want them to be able to go out into the world kind of having a deep understanding, but also, as Catherine said, to see themselves and what they're learning about. And I think not all children are going to be people who are sitting down reading long texts and books and writing. Some of them are practical children, and using those different kinds of pedagogical approaches, not only in our subject but across the curriculum, is really important. And I'm really pleased to see that there's been discussion surrounding that. Also, like Catherine, pleased to see the removal of the EBAC. I think it gives RE back its status as a humanities subject. I think it will encourage pupils to go on in secondary settings to take the GCSE and hopefully the A-level as well. It takes it away from not really being an option for them if they're looking at those EBAC kind of pots, if you like, to make up the subjects that they're choosing.
Thank you, Katie. Just a note, I put the conceptual position paper that Catherine referred to into the chat. I've just got 2 more people to ask. So now is definitely the time to put your questions in, else I'll just quickfire question them myself, and they'd far rather answer your questions than mine. So, Ben, what about other aspects of the curriculum and assessment review?
I'm just going to focus entirely on the proposal for the Attainment 8 measure, which is replacing the Progress 8 idea that currently exists in, so if we're talking GCSE here, and in secondary schools, GCSE, what goes on GCSE rules everything. Everything is filtered through that lens. I do have some concerns here. So the way it's been set up, particularly, I'm in a comprehensive school, but we have a full cohort entry. So for us, that would immediately seem right. We're hitting that particular basket. I think is it number 4? I think might be the suggestion we're talking about. There are some dangers with that, particularly with schools, and that they're more likely, therefore, to be the schools of religious character that do full cohort entry. There potentially is a negative impact on history and geography. I don't want that to happen. I think history and geography are important. Maybe reducing numbers, particularly, for example, in history. You could easily see a situation where a school would decide, right, we're going to put everybody in for RS, and then history may just becomes only perhaps available for the higher attaining students, and it becomes not necessarily available for lower attaining students. I am concerned about that. I think history should be available to all students who want to take it. I also teach GCSE RS in less time than other subjects get. Will that change when we become a normal subject? If I'm going to still have to teach RS in less time, what implications does that have, and where's that other time being used? Will it once again go to English and maths like it usually does? The potential is actually the idea of the Attainment 8 is breadth of choice, but like I say, I think there's a potential for a narrowing of choice almost. If a school says, right, RS is going to fill that bucket, they may do, say, another one gets filled by science, another one gets filled by the other English, and they're left then with one choice of subject. That's a real concern to me. I would want a much broader option of subjects to be available. And the final bit on that, again, if schools do make that decision, then who's going to teach that GCSE RS? Because we haven't got enough GCSE capable teachers. people are going to be shunted across from history, right? You can teach a bit of RS because we're reducing history, but we're increasing RS. So how it plays out over the next few years, I mean, this is a way off because we're talking sort of 2030 before we're into this kind of thing. But there are some concerns about how this practically works out when deputy heads and head teachers are making decisions about option blocks and so on, based on how this Attainment 8 proposal is going to work.
Thank you, Ben. And finally, Paul.
Yes, I mean, I like everything else that everyone else has said. It's all really good. A couple of things that they've not mentioned that I think are interesting. The material about information literacy, digital literacy, all of that material.
Yeah.
I think that's quite good. Quite how we managed to work it into a curriculum. There's time to work that out for those that have to, and also. We probably should mention the citizenship and the idea that citizenship's going to be a compulsory part of primary as well. And I want to be positive. My worry is, and this was my worry back in '93, was it? When citizenship appeared, the schools just go, oh well, we'll do citizenship and RE, and we'll do a bit of literacy and everything. We'll put it all together. And then we'll do. I'm sure that's not going to happen anywhere, but it's just a worry. But I'm trying to be positive.
I think what all of you have said all through reminds us that if we get consensus, which we're very hopeful that we will, it isn't going to be a magical remedy to all of the issues that there are in education and in religious education. But what we know is it is likely to improve the situation. And as Catherine said, if it doesn't happen, actually what would happen then is far worse. Good news, folks. No questions for you at all, except for SACREs. Maybe some will come now. Maybe they've been musing on them. So SACRE says, becoming part of a national curriculum. What does that mean for a school head teacher, for example? Who will design the curriculum? Would NATRE have any part in designing the curriculum? SACREs were an integral part of provision of curriculum at present. Would or should they carry on supporting the subject and schools? So I'm going to start with Catherine answering that, and then we'll go to Paul, and then Ben and Katie can fight and see if they want to put something else in. Catherine.
Okay, so I think it's worth, and actually Katie might be able to answer this better because teaching across primary, because actually if you look at the current national curriculum for national curriculum subjects, they vary quite a lot in terms of the detail that is provided. I think, and we don't know at the moment what kind of level of detail or specificity there would be in a national curriculum for RE. But at some point, and I think this is kind of clear more widely in the report, and I referred to this earlier when I talked about the local, is that teachers will be designing curriculum. Now, how that happens, I don't have an answer to. So it might be, and I don't want to speak for NATRE, it might be that NATRE might decide to produce something to help, or it might be that other providers do. Other, schools with a religious designation might decide to provide things, or a multi-academy trust might provide things to support across their trust. But I think if we look at what other subjects are doing, I think that's probably going to be the most helpful way of understanding how curriculum would then be designed. Yeah, that would be my start of a 10.
Thank you, Catherine. So what about the role of SACREs in that? Saj asks us a little bit about that, Paul.
Yeah, so the language is very difficult for us in the RE community to get a handle on, because what will be produced for a national curriculum are some some programs of study. They won't be curricula, and it's weird that we have a national curriculum that isn't a curriculum, and it won't be a syllabus either. It'll be some material, it'll be some guide, it'll be who knows what it'll be, because it will probably look different. It might look very, very much like the National Content Standard. You know, that's not a syllabus. So there is still going to be, as there is with other subjects in the curriculum, curricula being written by people, whether that's by publishers, whether it's by individuals in schools, whether it's by SACREs, who knows in the bright new future. But I will reiterate again what Dr. Vanessa Ogden has said, that she wants to celebrate the role of SACREs. She sees SACREs as being a part of this new settlement with a role that is supporting schools, supporting communities, influencing the way RE is done, and becoming an advisory sort of space, being an advisory sort of space for people to go to get help and advice.
Thank you, Paul. And I think that's a really important point and takes us back to the National Content Standard to remember the level at which other national curriculum subjects are written, and to note that it also said through the report that they wanted agency for teachers. They wanted teachers to be able to write what they were doing in the classroom. But as you rightly point out, people may, organisations, commercial and otherwise, may decide to write curricula there. I think we've probably answered that one, unless Katie or Ben, you want to add anything. Okay, John has put this question in. A local authority, which he's very familiar with, might see this as this change as an imposition by a Labour government on a Conservative local authority, destroying their right to set RE for local children, and fight like mad to delay any changes in the House of Lords. Do you think this is going to happen in other local authorities? He then says it might go Lib Dem in 2026. So I think that's probably a question about Conservative politicians and Conservative lords, or perhaps about the House of Lords more generally, and whether there are going to be people working against the consensus we talked about. Who would like to take this one for me? None of them is the answer.
Oh, well, I'll give it a go. So I think there was a couple of things that struck me about John's question. The first one was kind of to refer back to what Paul said about what we mean by the local, and actually, and what I said as well. Actually, I think the curriculum will still be developed and designed at that local level, and there will be a teacher agency around that. So I think that's important to grasp, I think, in terms of John's question. And the second thing is that the RE Council, the RE Policy Unit, which works with NATRE in particular, have done a lot of lobbying and had lots of conversations with people across the different political parties and so on for many years, and there were some really good relationships there, and Katie might want to say more about that. So I think there's been a lot of groundwork to help support the idea of RE going in national curriculum across all the different parties. But Katie may want to say something more about that, perhaps.
Katie?
No, I think exactly what you said, Catherine. I think that lots of individuals over many years have been talking to politicians and making them really aware and updated on, what high quality RE should look like using that national content standards. And I mentioned it earlier in the session, but I think, we've got so many of the RE community that have signed up and agreed that that's a really good standard for what high quality RE should look like in classrooms. And all that information is what's being shared with politicians when we go and do days of action, or in Westminster, or when we go to party conferences. And I think more than ever before, there's a real understanding from, in a cross-party sense, about what RE should look like, and that it's not the kind of version of what it might have been in the 70s or the 80s of, in primary, doing a picture of a Bible story and colouring it in. That actually this is an academically rigorous subject that looks at religious and non-religious worldviews and the diversity within them, using all those lenses that we talked about earlier, helping children to consider like how they engage with that information, their personal knowledge, and also looking at ways that different people live out their worldviews. So I think, as Catherine said, there's been a really kind of a lot of work that's gone on to lay the groundwork to helping people understand what this needs to look like going forward, so that children get the best possible offer from primary all the way through to secondary.
Thank you. Right. I missed your question, Tim. You have one sentence each of you to answer Tim's question. The CaAR says that achieving consensus will require compromise on all sides. Where do you think compromise might be needed? They thank you, Tim, for your question deeply. Ben, I'm going to start with you. Where might compromise be needed? One sentence.
Compromise is going to be needed from faith communities that they can't have a particular percentage of the curriculum.
Thank you, Ben. Katie.
I think that when we look at how RE is at the moment, and there are voices within that community that kind of want to put forward their positionality. So I think it's about kind of where we all stand, acknowledging, as we could do in a good RE curriculum, where we stand, and that there might need to be some shift there. And I think that the dual system as well, that might be something where we need to have a longer discussion surrounding that.
Thank you. Paul.
It's a tough one, isn't it? I think it's around people of all sorts, really, having to give up little bits of things they feel are really, really precious. If you are in a particular SACRE that has a particular pedagogy, you might not be able to that might not be the career. There was a question, I'll tell you what, I'll say there was a question a long time ago about national curriculum, and we asked SACREs whether they should do it. And I can't remember which SACRE it was, came back and said, yes, we're absolutely in favour as a national curriculum, as long as it's ours.
We'd all of that in many ways, wouldn't we? And we're not going to get it. Thank you, Paul. Catherine.
Yeah, kind of what they said, really. I don't necessarily have anything to add, but yeah, all of those things. But I think Paul's right. Basically, there's going to be little tiny things that some of us are precious about that we might have to let go, and we have to come back to the humility word. We're all going to have to be humble and say, yes, I'm going to have to give that up for the sake of the greater and the common good.
Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you for all of you for being here and taking away perhaps those two key words, the words of humility and of consensus, and then remembering who we're doing this for. It's for Katie's friend's baby and all of those other children and young people for whom this matters. And we can't get this wrong. We, the RE community, have been handed this, so we must not get this wrong. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. Go away and have a lovely evening, whatever you're going to do. We have recorded it. It will take a couple of weeks before we have chance to subtitle it, because accessibility is very important to us, but you will be able to point to this in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks all.